cozy angle. Maureen, I'm very excited to talk to you about your book today because I got to revisit it. It came out earlier this summer.
Yes.
Right around my birthday, actually. So that was thank you
happy
for
birthday.
coordinating that. Thank you. Thank you. It was July and it was a great way to celebrate. But I got to revisit it. And boy, it was like being swept away for the first time.
Oh, I love that.
I'm not going to lie. It was like a whole new book, but it was comfortable and cozy.
Ugh.
So it was very wonderful to get to revisit it. Have you had a chance to kind of, now that the book is out, like pause and just soak it in, or just like look at your pages and be like, oh, I did that?
A little bit. When I did the reading at my launch event, that was like, I spent a good chunk of time with that section preparing for that. So got to kind of revel in that a bit. And I will sort of pick it up, especially if I'm doing like a virtual event or something and I'm using it as a prop. I end up sort of flipping through it and just reading sections. But honestly, I'm so focused on deadlines for the next 2 books that it's been hard to really luxuriate with this one. So hopefully soon. I will say I did stop and read. I just got out the other night and just read all of the pull quotes in the beginning because I am just so grateful to all the authors who took the time to read and contribute. And I was feeling discouraged and I needed that burst of confidence that they gave me.
I'm also a writer, as you know, but folks may not know, but I'm also a writer. I also feel very discouraged at times. Do you have rituals that help you like pull out of that experience? Because writing can be a very isolating, lonely, kind of crazy making journey.
Yeah, I have a few things. So I've really was stuck on book 3 before I sort of unlocked what it's going to be about. And I could not unstick myself. And I went for like a long walk at the beach and it all kind of just slotted into place. Since my books are set in the golden age of Hollywood, I will often watch a classic movie and see if that sort of generates any inspiration or gets me out of the rut that I'm stuck in. Luckily, I write every day for work as a journalist. Yeah. So I get a lot of like constant feedback in that regard. So it's both good and bad because that teaches me to like never feel like anything's too permanent. And it's a great reminder of nothing you write will be for everyone because I'm all over the map with that kind of thing. But yeah, mostly like old movies or a walk on the beach.
Do you ever like go to Musso and Frank's and just like sit at a table by yourself and like soak it all in?
I feel like
Hollywood in?
Musso and Frank is too expensive to go and sit at the table by myself. I've been there too many times this year already because I've had both me and my boyfriend have had a lot of out of town visitors and we take everyone there because it's the best spot.
It's the best.
And the most recent trip we went, he was with our friends at another bar because they were waiting for me to get off work. So I got there before them and I just sat at the bar by myself for a bit. And I was sort of thinking like, oh, if my characters were sitting here, like what would they be doing?
They're real. Isn't it funny how they're not real, but they feel so real and formed I noticed in your acknowledgments that you thank them.
I did.
Which was very moving to me because I don't see that often with writers that they reach out to the characters in that way.
Well, it's so funny. I always, writers always talk about like the characters taking over, they show you where they want to go. And I was sort of skeptical of that being a real thing. My thesis advisor in undergrad, Deborah Harkness, wrote the All Souls trilogy, and she talks a lot about that all the time. About it's like this very like woo-woo experience for her, and I was like, I don't know, I don't know if that's going to happen for me, but it very much did.
Yeah.
They really do take on a life of their own, and they tell you when you're trying to force them to do something that's out of character or things like that.
Yeah, it's weird. It's like little ghosts that exist for real in your brain. I feel like in a lot of conversations that I've seen you have about this book, you have to kind of, or maybe you're asked to explain like why this time
Mm.
period for historical romance and why actors in Hollywood. So I guess I want to counter it and say like, why not? Like, should
Mm.
there be? Do you feel like this is an underrepresented time period in this space of romance, especially historical romance? And is there a pitch that you kind of want to make or a point that you want to make to people about why it should be more embraced?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I would love all the books set in this era. I mean, I I didn't feel like I had permission to write this book because I held this world and these films on such a sacred plane that I uh, kind of felt like I shouldn't touch it. And then I read The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo and was like, oh no, this is the kind of thing you can do.
Taylor
So
Jenkins Reid.
yes,
Yes.
shout out to Taylor Jenkins
No
Reid
big
for like
deal.
giving me the permission to create my own version of classic Hollywood. And that's still one of my favorite reads of the last however many years.
Really?
Yeah, I love it so much. Um, and when I read that, I was like, why are there not more books like this? Like,
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
is such a juicy, interesting time period with so many different tyes of people interacting. It definitely one of those spaces in history where the things that were really happening to these people are so soapy and crazy that like you don't really have to look very far to find inspiration or make things up. So yes, definitely I hope more people write in this space. I was speaking with Adriana Herrera, who writes 19th century historical romance in Paris, which is also a very underexplored space. And she was saying like this made me really want to, my book made her want to write a book in this space. And I'm like, please do, because there are so many interesting people of color who are working in this period, either subsuming their identity to fit what the studio was demanding of them or doing their own thing. Like
Yeah.
there was a whole
Yeah.
separate Black film industry that we know very little about today. And I'm not going to write those stories. I'm not the person to write those stories, but I would love for other authors to do so.
Yeah. Especially with romance
Yes.
involved. And I came to know you as reading your reviews of romance books. You're a huge supporter of romance. You're a reader of romance. You come to writing romance with like a lot of expertise. What did you bring to it as a reader? Like, because I think having a reader's eye is very important. I meet a lot of romance writers who were like, I never really read romance until I wrote it. And that blows my mind because I'm also
That
a
does
longtime reader.
blow my mind
but they're out
as
there.
well. I'm always surprised when people say that. And sometimes a little suspicious, honestly. But
we can admit that here.
Yeah. Honestly, at first it was hell because I was so in my own head about with that reader's eye, and not even so much the reader's eye, but the sort of reader's discourse that happens around romance and romance reviews online. I would get so tripped up on like, oh my God, what are people gonna say about that? And I can't do that because it might provoke this reaction. And I really had to work to get that out of my head. Because I was so attuned to that as trying to know what trends were and what was people were liking or not liking. And so I had to work really hard to shut that part of my brain up. But in terms of reading, it's interesting because I am a lifelong reader.
Yeah.
In love with love since I was a small child. Seeing Beauty and the Beast being my first film in theaters was made a big impression.
Oh man. Okay. Oh, that's so sweet. So you were like the first movie you see and you're just like, oh,
yeah,
I get what
books
I want.
and romance.
Yes.
That's all I want.
Happy endings, done.
And so I've always loved reading, but I really wanted reading this book to feel like watching a film from that era.
It does.
So I think I was thinking about it less as a reader and more about how is this replicating what I feel when I watch one of these films.
Yeah. Have you, in the kind of wake of the strike that's happening here in Hollywood, which has been, I think it's been so momentous here and emotional and disruptive and hard. And I don't know if it like completely translates outside of specifically to this industry, are there things about it that you kind of have been observing as a person who writes romance, like genre romance set in historical Hollywood?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because sort of the same time period that I'm writing is when most of these labor unions first started. And a ton of what I write about in the book, sort of this interplay between the studios and personal identity and responsibility, was at the heart of these labor unions being founded, because they were tired of being abused by the studios and wanted to have an entity that they could fight for their own self-protection. And so I feel like it's just yet another reminder of how cyclical these things
Okay,
are,
yes, right?
and how much history repeats itself. Um, just things like the Academy Awards are in my book, and the fact that the Academy was created to weaken SAG and to weaken the guilds, because the studios wanted to sort of condense power. And so they thought, well, if we create this little like organization that gives out awards, maybe they'll be happy.
I did not know that.
Um,
That's crazy. I did not know that. See, you
Yeah.
you are like an
no,
Hollywood
Louis B.
encyclopedia.
Mayer was instrumental in founding the Academy because he was like looking for a way to union bust without union busting.
Wow.
And so the Academy itself has a very complicated relationship in the history of these strikes, because at this point they should be basically an impartial third party, and they are, but that's certainly not how they began.
Yeah. I love the kind of, because I was going to ask, there's like a real, the more things change, the more they stay the same energy to it. And I think one thing, and going back and kind of rereading through the book and looking at the way you tackle Joan's story, I didn't do a proper, like, here's what the book is about introduction, but Joan Davis, Hollywood starlet, dealing with scandal.
Yes.
Dash, her co-star, who she has an accidental marriage of convenience. I was like trying to tag it. That's not exactly right. You tell us.
Yes.
A better way to describe it.
So Joan is engaged to a rising matinee idol,
Wink, wink.
Monty Smith, and upon this engagement, which is an engagement of convenience,
yes,
discovers that she was accidentally married for real on set to her longtime co-star Dash Howard, who she hates, just absolutely detests. But through an on-set prank gone wrong, they're married for real, and they have to go to Reno for 6 weeks to get a divorce, and they're going to make a film while they're there because the studio doesn't want to lose 6 weeks of their time.
Which is like that's honestly sounds very familiar to how things are today.
Yes. I mean, honestly, the studios are probably so grateful that it's easier to get a divorce.
Yeah, very true.
Because now they don't have to navigate that.
But in the spirit of kind of history repeating itself, it was really interesting to go back and read through Joan's story of dealing with the sexism, the misogyny, it's rampant, and you tackle it so well in the book that I would love to know kind of your perspective writing her backstory, but also if you were looking at the way Hollywood is today in writing, in crafting her story.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, her backstory, a lot of it came from Joan Crawford and her actual biography. But I have read so much press from that time because I used to work in the Warner Brothers archives, and one of my jobs was to photocopy documents for researchers. So, and I would always just read everything as I was photocopying it if it was interesting, which most of the time,
what a cool job
it was. That was my student job because USC owns the Warner Brothers archives. Like that was my work study job.
Wow, let me tell you, I went to a small liberal arts college in Maine, and that was not similar to my work study job at all.
But and they have all these press books that they used to create, which is like kind of similar to press notes today. but much flashier with like a lot more pictures and things you could cut out. And so they would just basically create these stories that they would then encourage papers to reprint as if they wrote them themselves, or giving them copy that they could use. And to read those things, I've always been horrified by the way they write about women and like how casual the sexism is. Like I remember I found a clipping of a cover of Hedy Lamarr from like the early to mid 40s, and it was like, Hedy Lamarr, Hollywood beauty, too bad she's got an empty head and is just a pretty face. And it's like, this woman invented Wi-Fi.
Oh my gosh.
But of course, no one cared or knew about that then. And it would have, not gone with the image they were trying to construct. And then also being a journalist now,
right,
and seeing the ways that this still continues to be a problem in spite of how often it gets called out now.
Yeah.
But still critics and reporters can just so casually include this in their work. And there's such a double standard of expectations for male actors and female actors still, where, you can be Leonardo DiCaprio and only date women under 25 for your whole life and break up with them the second they turn 25 and never get married, and people think you're a playboy and sexy. Or you can be Taylor Swift and get derided for how many people you've dated and have every relationship hyper scrutinized, be villainized, and constantly be asked by the press, like, when are you finally going to settle down and get married? So it's not changed.
Yeah. It's so bad that Taylor Swift literally sings about Leonardo DiCaprio in a song.
It's true.
And the double standard.
Yeah. And across the board, like Clooney was the same before he married Amal. Like, these guys just get to do whatever they want, and it's part of their image and it makes them more appealing. But if women are owning their sexuality and their desire, then that's an opportunity to villainize them. And, I really wish we would stop that, but I don't think we're going to.
No, I don't think so. And I think in reading your book, it's that feeling of like, oh, we love to look back and be like, oh, look how far we've come. And then I was like reading this again, and I was like, oh no, we really haven't.
No, I mean, not to ruin what Joan's secret is, but that's still many actors' secrets today, or still creates a lot of scandal today, and people find it very salacious.
I have a Joan question for you, because I know, and you do a nice explainer in the back of the book for people like me who are like, who is Joan Crawford? That's literally the level of knowledge I'm coming to with this.
Well, I'm so glad that you still enjoyed and were sucked into the storytelling. And B, that it made you want to know more. Because then I feel like in both cases, I've done my job.
You've nailed it. And I actually think like it makes me want to read all the biographies. It makes me want to watch all the movies.
This makes me so happy.
It definitely makes me want to get an early copy of your next book. No pressure.
I think we can.
Okay,
that can be
arranged. I do know the writer. But I had a question, and I don't think I loved hearing about how you came up with the name Joan Davis, right? You put two together. But Joan in the book, that's Joan Davis, is not her real name. It's a stage name. Like every starlet has a stage name. But how did you come up with her real name?
Oh, okay.
Which is Mildred Schulk.
Yeah, so Mildred also came from Joan Crawford, because one of her most famous roles was Mildred Pierce, in which it's kind of, Mildred Pierce was very much the type of film that my Joan is striving after, this women's picture where it's really exploring her psyche and desires and her world and giving her this meaty role. And Joan Crawford had left MGM and sort of the peak of her stardom as a beauty, but had never really been taken seriously as an actress. And she made Mildred Pierce at Warner Brothers, and it was this big comeback for her after losing her contract and being declared box office poison. And so I wanted to sort of pay tribute to how important that role was, but also, no offense to anyone named Mildred, but it's just not a very sexy Hollywood name.
Joan's a sexier name.
Yeah. And then the shock, I'll be honest with you, at this point, I do not remember
It
where
just
that came from.
Those are the best moments in writing, though, right?
Yeah, I was looking for something that sounded like dry and chalky and dull, and that it just came. It was that.
It works. It's great. I was reading it, like, chuckling to myself because I was like, this is the perfect fictional real name of an actress who no longer goes by that name.
There's also in the book, I can't remember exactly where, but when she's explaining why she took on the name Joan Davis, and she wrinkles her nose and says, like, they would have named me something terrible like Lucille or something, which is not a reference to my mom's first name,
which is Lucille.
But Joan Crawford's real name was Lucille Lesur.
Which is a great name.
Yeah. They studios didn't like it because they thought Lesur sounded like sewer.
Wow.
So
okay. I mean, I can see the leap there, but
yeah. So yeah, just kind of lots of layers happening there with the names and the connections.
That seems like a really fun part of getting to write in this time period.
It definitely is. You know, it's interesting. I've gotten really mixed reactions to it. So
really?
Yeah.
Okay,
so a lot of people are like, oh, the Easter eggs are so fun. And I love being able to identify like where you took that thing and what that's a reference to.
Meanwhile, I'm like, she made all of these up and they have no Easter eggs.
But then there has been a subset of people that was like, oh, how original. This is so obviously, like, somebody called the book Clark Gable fan fiction. And I was like, yes, thank you. That is exactly what I wrote. But they obviously did not mean it as a compliment.
That's so funny to me too, because I feel like it's been long enough.
Sure.
Since Clark Gable.
It's like, not a book about Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce.
Yes, which if you want to write, I will support.
I think TikTok's got that covered.
Okay, good. Do you think in 100 years someone will be writing that love story?
Oh man.
And
I guess it depends how long it lasts.
Okay. And do you want to make a prediction on how long it will last?
No. Okay. I don't know. She seems smitten.
She seems very happy.
Yeah.
So speaking about spicy moments, because we do know, we saw, I don't know if you saw, but there was a actual photograph of Taylor Swift kissing Travis Kelce. We talk a lot in the romance book world, romance landia, as it's often referred to, about spicy scenes, steam in books. That just means the actual romantic scenes. You nailed it.
Thank you.
I might have gone back and like reread those twice. But anytime I talk to a romance writer, everybody has kind of their own philosophy process about writing intimacy in books. Also, like, how detailed is it going to be? Is it going to be an open door, meaning we get every detail, or a closed door, meaning it kind of fades to black? Like, what was your thought going into writing romance about how you wanted to tackle intimacy, sex, sex scenes? It doesn't matter what we call it. And then as a follow-up, like, what are your thoughts with our romance readers' obsessions with the steam or lack thereof?
Yeah.
Because I know, as a person who's released a romance book, and I'm sure you do too, people will, when they review the book, they'll say, like, 4 stars, 2 chili peppers to rank the amount of sexiness in the book. They use the chili pepper emoji. So it is a thing.
Yeah. I myself in my reviews for EW use fire emoji.
Thank you.
So, well, in terms of like how I make those decisions, I mean, I really enjoy reading steamy open door scenes. So I kind of always knew that I would want to write that to some extent. I will never be Sierra Simone or Katie Robert. Like, my brain just does not work that way. But I sure enjoy reading their books.
I haven't read Sierra Simone, but that's on my
that's
on my to-do list.
She's amazing.
Yes.
But it's also dictated by character. So in terms of like level of description or what's happening, like, Joan is a very fiery, passionate person. So I didn't feel like there was any way I could tell her love story without including all of the fiery, passionate parts of it. So I always sort of just knew that that would be part of it. And I think it got significantly cut down. I want to say that I wrote that whole scene in one day in my first draft. And I want to say it was like 5,500 words or something.
It's a lot of pages.
It was extremely detailed. And my editor was like, a lot of this is repetitive. You know, they're doing the same things to each other. Maybe let's tighten it up a little bit.
This is the best part.
Yeah. And I mean, she was right. It definitely needed
editors,
to be.
Editors are editors for a reason. They're good at their job.
Yeah. So that from that perspective, I like steam, so I write it in my books. It might change depending on who the characters are, how much there is, or level of detail, but probably can always expect it. And in terms of the discourse about sex scenes, like, first of all, I don't understand what's happening in society right now, but there's some real like backlash among Gen Z and Gen Alpha to any kind of sex scene.
Really?
Yes.
I'm so far removed from those gens.
No, there's
except
like
as a parent, but
people will. I'm trying to think what the most recent example of this is. It's like in a TV. All the time there's a sex scene in a film or a TV show, and they're complaining that like, ew, they don't want to see that, and you don't need that to tell the story. And certainly, I am not like for objectification and gratuitous sex scenes. Well, gratuitous
is fine. Yeah, objectification.
But there seems to be this like real actual like revulsion and fear around the subject, which has me very concerned because it feels like very puritanically driven. And I don't understand how all of these, I don't know if it's a social media thing and an isolation thing, but like, even if you don't want to talk about it in public or you want it to be a private thing, like being revolted by it in popular culture feels like a problem to me.
Wow, that's really interesting.
Like, you need to be able to discuss and confront intimacy in your own life, and it feels like they are not. In terms of the romance discourse specifically, I find that hilarious because obviously everyone's rating is very subjective.
Yes.
So my 5 flames might be somebody else's 2 flames.
Yes, that's very true. That's a funny part about it, right? Like, what you think you're offering as a writer, might be either too spicy for somebody or not spicy enough.
And so that's why I do think you just have to write what you feel works for you and your characters, and not worry that you're going to turn someone off by having it in there or not having it in there, because for, no matter what, everybody's going to have a different take on whether it's enough or too much. So you can't game that out.
Has having published a book changed how you approach writing?
Not really, no. As I have a kind of boring process. Like, I write very linearly. I'm sort of a plotzer in that I have like a general shape of a plot and sort of story beats, but I figure out a lot as I go at the same time. And I sort of am a flashlight writer where I definitely can see the next chapter ahead of me, but not necessarily that much further. And that has stayed the same. And no, I don't think so. I was worried that feedback, positive or negative, would impact that, but it's more been demands on my time than sort of any other external factor.
All right, before we wrap up, I just want to know romance tropes that you love to use as a writer, love to read, or the ones that you're like, no, thank you.
Okay. Well, this is enemies to lovers, and that is probably my favorite trope.
My favorite too.
Because it just creates so much tension, and Shakespeare basically did it best with Beatrice and Benedict, and we've all just been trying to replicate that ever since, I feel like. I actually don't, this is kind of bad. I don't usually love reading Friends to Lovers because I feel like it's hard to do well. But that being said, my second book is Friends to Lovers and also Second Chance Romance. And I feel like both of those are hard to do well because Second Chance, to sort of justify why it fell apart the first time, but it's working this time, can be
Yeah,
quite
that's hard.
challenging.
That's really hard. Yeah. It's like hard in real life to figure that out. And it's hard. Like
so I like those. I pretty much like any trope when it's well written, and I think a lot of them are deceptively harder than they appear. I'm obsessed with fake dating, which is going to be book 3. The whole sort of enemies to lovers or having to fake a thing, all of that is my favorite.
Sucks you in.
Yeah, I probably will never write, and I generally don't read The Secret Baby.
I don't do Secret Baby.
Yeah, it's just not for me. Yeah, Love Only One Bed or Forced Proximity.
Love it. Love it all.
Yeah. I love most tropes except for Secret Baby.
Okay. Everybody has one trope that they like
and
do
it's
without.
I don't know. It's just it's funny. My friend Jenny Nordbeck, who is also a romance author, she has 2 small children. So she's like, I don't want Secret Baby because that immediately makes everything less sexy because I have 2 kids and I don't want to think about that. But my issue is more like, I just start worrying about that. There's just so much added context and things I have to worry about. And I don't want that. I just want to think about these 2 characters.
I like how you I feel the same way. It's like you don't want to have to be stressed about something in the love story.
I don't want there to be a love scene and be like, who's feeding the secret baby?
Yeah, I'm with you on that. You like romance. I like serious topics in romance, but I also need it to be like a little stress free.
Yeah, I love like tackling like mental health or something like that. But if I have to worry about a tiny human in another room, I can't.
That's
do
where
that.
you draw the line.
Yeah.
Okay, my last question for you, and then if anyone has anything they would like to share, I would love to hear it. But I want to know like how you think the stars of the time, the 1930s, would react to reading about themselves in this way, even in a fictionalized way. But do you think they would feel seen?
I would like to hope that Joan Crawford would, because I think to this day she is deeply misunderstood. We can thank Mommy Dearest and Faye Dunaway for a lot of that. And I think she was ferociously ambitious and deeply ahead of her time. And so I would hope that somebody's celebrating that and seeing that as like something to value in her would be welcomed. But she also had a very complicated relationship with how others saw her. So I can't quite predict if she would take it well or not.
Yeah.
I feel like Clark Gable would just be like, this is ridiculous.
Really?
Yeah, because he was, I don't know. He was a kind of self-serious person, I think, in a lot of ways. But also deeply insecure. So I don't think he could like handle the level of interiority that I have given Dash.
Yeah. Well, Maureen, I adore this book. I'm so excited. What is the title of your next one? Are you allowed to say?
I actually don't know, but I have been saying it, so we will just say it.
Great.
It is called His Girl Hollywood.
Oh, that's so cute.
Thanks.
Oh my God, I love that. I cannot wait to read it.
Thank you.
Thank you for chatting with me. This was really, really fun to get to pick your brain.
Well, thanks for doing this. I love your book in a New York Minute.
Thank you.
It's so fun. I've made my mom read it. I've made my sister read it. It came out 2021? 22. It was all like one of our favorite books of that year.
That's so nice of you.
So I really appreciate you doing this.
Well, the pleasure is all mine. Would anyone like to share any questions or comments? Mom?
So I was reading and I was so distracted because I kept Where did she get that? Is it real? Is it not? Is it from the actor's life? Is it from a movie? Is it not? Is that really the dress she wore or not? Is that really what happened in Reno or not? So I got so distracted, I lost the story. And then I had to listen to the audiobook again.
Audiobook is so good, by the way.
No, it's really
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah, Patty Murin,
So
incredible
on a
narrator.
research level, she was always working way out. I didn't know what she was doing, but how did you capture? Because to me, the Reno part was really fascinating, and then you said that really was a ranch in your life.
Lazy Me, yeah.
Right. So how did you? How much time did you spend, and like, how did you get the research on this? I don't recall you going to a library. I wasn't around all the time. But then the other thing was the dresses and the things that she wore, like when she was at the Oscars and when she was here. I just wondered, did you make it up? Did you pull it from a book or from the archives or whatever? So your process on the research to me was, because I know you know so much about Hollywood. I just wondered how you decided what you were putting in that was real and what you were gonna embellish.
That's a great question, because I too, like, I almost feel like my brain is playing that. I get swept up in just assuming you made it all up because I don't know.
I love it. Good.
But I do think but then when, like, in reading your acknowledgments in your letter at the end of the book, you talk about a lot of the research that you did. Like, you clearly, and talking to you about this, it's like you're an encyclopedia.
Well, it's a combo of things. I mean, if you recall, we were supposed to go to Reno.
Yes. Have you been? Have you gone?
I've been to a rodeo in Reno.
Okay,
So it was like on the outskirts of Reno. It was not the historic downtown. And we were supposed to go on a family trip in summer 2021, which was when I was sort of finalizing this with my agent and getting ready to send it out. And so I had written a lot of it, but I did want to go and sort of get that experience. Wildfires prevented that trip, so I still have not been. I got a lovely Instagram DM from a reader who has lived in Reno since the early 90s and praised me for how right I got her town.
Oh, I love that so
which was
much.
wonderful because, I didn't get to go, so I was sort of going off of what I could find on the internet. In terms of research, this was a little different from my first unpublished book that got me my agent, where I did like probably a year's worth of research before I ever even started writing. Whereas this, I felt like I was already so steeped in the world that there were certain things I looked up before I started writing, like how everything worked in Reno, what Reno was like. The Reno Historical Society has incredible online archives where they've got photos of these ranches and details. Like, I found on their website a picture of a postcard from the Lazy Me Ranch. And so the way I describe the bungalow is in that picture on the postcard. And the Hotel Riverside is still there in Reno. And there's pictures on their website of like Frank Sinatra and Ava Gardner having dinner there in the 50s. And there's just a lot of great detail, whether it's maps or accounts of how the city was laid out and what was close to each other. So really tried to make sure I got that right in terms of geography, as well as sort of the weird traditions of getting a divorce there in that time period. So that was like the bulk of my research. But the nice thing is that this being something I already know and love is that instead of doing a ton and then writing, I kind of look things up as I go and feel like something's missing. So, and I also, a big part of my writing process is building a Pinterest board before I ever write a word. And I usually know which stars are my inspiration. So a lot of photos of them go on the Pinterest board. So a lot of the clothes come from whatever I put on there if I'm trying to decide what they're wearing. But some just come out of my head, like Joan's outfit when they go fishing, that's sort of the like sailor brass button pants and a cute little top, which I was just like, I just like this outfit. I would want to wear this outfit. But then other ones are based on like actual photographs of her that maybe I changed the color or put together two dresses or something like that. But yeah, Pinterest board and Googling. And then I like to read biographies and things like that. But also because I interact with so much of this stuff in my outside life, I will just sort of, if I see something, be like, oh, that's really interesting. I'm going to file that away. That should go in a book.
Well, it's also interesting, like, because do you take any of the kind of Hollywood stuff of now and apply it?
Oh, that's a good question. Yes, I did a lot in book 2 because Arlene, who is the heroine of book 2, is making her directorial debut. And female directors are still under such different scrutiny now. And particularly in how they are perceived on a set and how they feel they have to behave around a crew and the different approaches that directors take, like whether they're, firm but kind or whether they're a tyrant. And there is a lot of discourse about that, particularly in the wake of Me Too and Time's Up. And so it was very important to me in that. And I've talked to a lot of female directors in my work at EW I wanted to make it clear that the things that we traditionally associate with femininity, so like compassion, being emotional, things like that, are actually assets as a director, and that you don't need to be this tyrant, but that you're also always hyper aware of how you're being perceived in a way that a man on a set is never going to be, probably. And that felt very modern to me, particularly because there weren't a lot of female directors in this time period, but it also feels timeless. So that definitely came into play a lot.
Great question. Anyone else?
Anybody?
Well, Maureen, thank you.
Thank
Was
you.
really, I really am so excited I got the chance to kind of pick your brain about this book. It was really like a little bit of like a study for me. So I can go home and take everything I learned.
I love it.
And apply it to my own writing practice.
Oh, good. Well, I don't think you need help.
No. Remember how you were saying you had experienced being discouraged?
Yeah.
That is a universal experience. It's really tough.
Yeah. Particularly when the world is falling apart.
Yeah.
So.
But the joy of romance is that it gets to be our escape and like our remedy for, I think, the grief and the sorrow of everyday life.
Yeah.
Whether it's, a big thing or a little thing. So this is important. We need your work. Thanks, Maureen.
Thanks, Kate.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you, guys at Zibby's.
Thank you.
And we have copies of both books available to buy at the cash register.
Buy them all. I was like, I'm going to get her to sign my book, but you already did sign it.
It's not really a question, it's kind of a comment. Romance in the studio system in the 30s, 40s, and 50s